Hello, Expo attendees. I am your favorite developer interviewer, the Purple Sharpie, otherwise known as Sharpie if you're feeling a little bit strange today. Now, speaking of strange developers, I have Xalavier Nelson Jr., a third-time attendee of the Game Devs of Color Expo, creator and creative director of Strange Scaffold, the team that has brought you Dog Airport Game, Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator, and most notably, the game that we're here to talk about today, El Paso Elsewhere. How are we doing today?
Doing great, feeling existentially terrified all of the time.
Well, I want you to go ahead and shoulder that fear for a little bit to talk to me about what El Paso Elsewhere is actually about.
El Paso Elsewhere is a third-person supernatural throwback shooter in the vein of things like Max Payne and the Die Hard trilogy, where you dive around corners in slow motion, fighting werewolves, vampires, and other creatures of the night in a deeply haunted motel in a journey to slay your ex, the Lord of the Vampires, before she destroys the world.
Oh my God. Okay. That was a lot darker and a lot heavier than I expected, and my little heart can't take it. So we're going to go ahead and roll this trailer, and hopefully it's not filled with a bunch of crazy action that'll cause my heart to literally burst. It's not, right?
I cannot make any... I can barely afford health insurance myself. I'm not going to cover anyone else's liability.
Let's roll the tape!
I'm in a two-story motel in El Paso, Texas that gained another 46 stories yesterday, all below ground. It's extremely haunted. And my ex is at the bottom. Draculae, Lord of the Vampires. She's waiting for me. Would you believe that this is a love story?
As always, your trailer leaves me both incredibly excited and somewhat terrified of the thoughts inside of your head. And I mean that as only the best compliment possible, honestly. So let's get started off by talking about the main character here. Where were they birthed from? What is their origin story?
So James Savage, are we talking narratively or just like the creative process or the creation process of it?
Let's talk about what his entire purpose is inside of this game.
So James Savage is a folklore researcher and historian who had quite a journey in his past, meeting leprechauns, fairies, and in general, exploring the supernatural piece of the world as if it was real, because in this universe, quite a bit of it is. And along that way, one day, tracking down, the legends and origin of our idea of Dracula, of vampires, after a particularly heinous encounter with some actual vampires, he knocked on the door of a castle. The person who opened that door was a woman named Janet Drake, who turned out to be the actual inspiration for Bram Stoker's infamous story. Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, and Janet Drake was in fact the infamous Draculae. They started a relationship. Starting a romantic relationship with the Lord of the Vampires will leave you effed up. And several years later, James is now coming back to his hometown, where Draculae, whatever has occurred between them, has decided to start the apocalypse in his hometown of El Paso, Texas. And he is coming to stop her, because at this point, he's the only person who can.
Now, inside of the game itself, I had an opportunity to play it very briefly, but I'm sure all of our listeners will enjoy being able to play it in a very, very near future in 2023, obviously. But
don't tell me that 2023 is in the near future. That's a bet. Why would you do this thing?
Look, time space is a complete concept. And when you play this game, you personally feel it because some of the action-paced mechanics inside of the game do allow you to kind of neglect time and space, albeit like the situation of actual physics. You know, like here's my question for you. Where did the inspiration from a lot of the gameplay come? You mentioned Max Payne. I personally was getting Blade vibes, you know?
One of the other big inspirations was actually the 2005 Constantine movie. I watched that thing, was blown away by its interpretation, not just of the DC universe, but what supernatural action could look like. And I saw, in particular, there's one scene in a hospital where holy water is shooting from the sprinklers as John, with a cross-shaped automatic shotgun, blows away vampires. And the only thing that I could think of in that moment was, why isn't this a video game and why haven't I already played it?
It was definitely a cinematic choice filming that, you know, and it is currently available on Netflix, and I did watch it last night, and it's incredibly funny that you say that because that scene had me rolling, literally dying, you know. It's also very interesting that you say that. Were some of the weapon choices inside of the game also coming from a lot of those inspirations as well?
Not necessarily. I have a real personal joy that I find in the development process of finding exactly what a game needs to be the thing that it is. No more, no less. So if you look at even things like the Die Hard trilogy back on PS1 or Constantine, there's, I wouldn't say unnecessary weapons, but there's definitely like several pistols, several rifles. Breaking down those archetypes into singular weapons for every category that fit our world, fit our character, and figuring out what the specific things they were supposed to communicate about how we wanted the player to move through the world was a really enjoyable process that happened really early on in development. And in continuing accordance with sort of the surprise involved in our development, a lot of those decisions have remained, if anything, more prescient as development goes forward and we realize exactly what each piece of your toolkit communicates about the world that you're within and about the gameplay experience you're supposed to have. One of my favorite things about that, actually, though, that is more unique than sort of a typical third-person shooter is our melee system. We have essentially the idea of consumable melee things. As you in slow motion blow enemies away, you can also tear apart the scenery. And as you tear apart the scenery, blowing up chairs and tables and watching them all erupt in slow motion, sometimes wooden objects will drop stakes. And when you drive a stake through a vampire's heart, that stake breaks, but it sends them flying and blood splatters, and in general, the theatricality that you notice in things like Constantine, the really not just the visceral, but the tangible implications of supernatural combat are something that we've worked really hard to further and identify on a sustainable development schedule with an indie budget, and we're deeply proud of what we've produced.
Now, the very first time we ever spoke, there was a very, very distinct difference between some of the sentences you've given me now and some of the sentences you give me then. Previously, there was a lot of I statements. I worked on this. I did this. I was responsible for this. I'm hearing a lot of we statements. I know that previously on Strange Scaffolding, you were basically a team of one ad hoc, right? With a couple of additional contractors, maybe I believe the number you gave me was 2 or 3 additionally. Has that changed? Have you expanded? Because this project is significantly larger than any of the projects I've seen coming out of Strange Scaffolding thus far.
So Strange Scaffold is still me working with what we call a constellation model of contractors, trying to find ways to bring games into being, very singular visions and ways that enable contractors and collaborators autonomy, while putting them in a position to make games better, faster, cheaper, and healthier than it is assumed they can be created. Back on Dog Airport game, if we look at everyone who contributed to the Dog Airport game, sometimes people would contribute like literally one thing that's still valuable, and there's space for doing that if you open your development process to that. But if we pick up everyone, maybe there's like 10 to 12 people, but most of the development process was me and Tom Vanita, the programmer and co-designer on that game, making a universe of transit with the help of a lot of dog stock photos. These days, Strange Scaffold has 6 projects in development.
Oh, wow.
7 if you count a game that we're co-developing that we haven't unveiled yet, but we're very excited about. And we're over 50 people. So
wow! Congratulate! That's huge. That's fantastic news. That is the type of growth that I love to see for developers out here, literally putting their hearts, their time, and their energy on the line. I'm so incredibly happy for you and everybody at Strange Scaffold. Now, I have to ask, because you know I was going to ask, this game has always, every single project you've ever made, every single project that's ever come out of the studio that you're a part of has always been a story that you have personally wanted to tell because it is close to you. What is that story this time?
This time around, there's a few different philosophical themes I wanted to touch on. One of the first was relationship trauma in the absence of domestic violence. There's a lot of emotional trauma and abuse that happens in relationships. There's a lot of misaligned relationships in terms of faith, age, etc. There is really positive pieces of James's history with Draculae, and then there's ones that are going to scar him for the rest of his time in El Paso Elsewhere and in the hopeful future games that we'll produce with this character, future stories, and really digging into yet another examination of relationship trauma and dynamics when you were not physically touched, but you were nevertheless altered irreparably by coming into contact with another person is something I care deeply about. The name James Savage means a lot to me. James Savage is the name of our protagonist, and the idea that, first of all, you can be anything if you're Black. You can be an astronaut, you can be the president, but you can't be angry. Anger, an expression of negative emotion, even when you see Black grief and the wailing that can come from it, is inherently treated as both dangerous and bestial. So having this intellectual but action-ready character who has buried in his very name the idea of Black people being called savages. They still call us that in comments on the internet today. Means a lot to me. And finally, I think really examining with the overall design landscape of the game, what it means to build a modular, expressive landscape for the player to make decisions. This game is not telling you you have to use a shotgun against this specific enemy because that's the way you got to do it. There's not arbitrary health or armor bars, really breaking things down to, as video games have advanced, we've built more design language and vocabulary, and that has resulted in incredible experiences, but it's also resulted in some accessibility issues. As someone who steps into the latest open world epic is left to grapple with a combined 30, 40, 50 years of gameplay vocabulary and systems and progressions all being laid on them at the same time, with El Paso Elsewhere stripping away those layers of artifice to, again, exactly what the game needs to communicate, being a badass, sensitive, and emotionally intelligent Black man fighting creatures of the night in a haunted motel, and in everything that comes with dimensions shifting around you as you go deeper and deeper towards the source of your trauma, is both a terrifying prospect because there's always that question of, is it enough? Are people going to get it? But it's also one of the most exciting processes I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of, as the entire team and everyone who comes into contact with the game has this opportunity to say, it doesn't have an RPG leveling system. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I still feel incredibly satisfied with the experience I'm having. Why? Because every game having a different metric and margin for how it communicates to the player with vision and intent is something that developers need and that our players deserve.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up the player experience, especially because that's not something we typically hear developers always 100% in tune with, as you know. Like, it's very, very common for community managers, PR consultants, and sometimes even QA to actually step in and talk about the player experience. But you yourself have always been very, very open about talking about what you're trying to give the player and the type of experience that you're trying to communicate through your art, through your game. As a matter of fact, you have a very, very, very prosperous TikTok where you do that exact thing all the time. You help people wrestle and grapple with some of the more difficult concepts of game development so that even the most uneducated layman can really understand some of these topics. I want to talk to you about some of the musical direction that you took inside of this game, because it is very unique, completely unlike anything you've ever put inside of any of your previous projects. And I want to talk a little bit more about why you chose to go this direction.
So we tried a different soundtrack for El Paso Elsewhere. I'm actually pulling up the literal internal documentation that we had for like the mood board of how this thing was supposed to be produced. And there was a list of soundtracks, a list of different musical tracks. Underneath the heading audio board, our audio vibe is, in all caps, existential violence. So every single track that would fit with a theme that could fit into a potential trailer for the game that could exist alongside the combat, everything from Pink Floyd's Great Gig in the Sky to Fat Lip's What's Up Fat Lip to Cloud Busting by Kate Bush was in this playlist. And we started to put together some tracks for the game based off of this identification of what we were attempting to achieve. And it didn't land. We were wondering why. And the common element of What's Up Fat Lip, Great Gig in the Sky, Cloud Busting, rap and hip hop in general is the fact that we were missing an instrument. The vocalist and lyricist is a core piece of providing a counterpoint to their background music in general, and that creates the overall effect that we were hoping to achieve. And so it was like, damn, we're gonna have to make a rap album, aren't we? And I've been a songwriter for years and various commercial and non-commercial contexts already. This is definitely the weirdest, hardest process I've laid on top of all of the difficulty that comes from making a whole ass ambitious video game, but also the deep satisfaction of producing track after track, putting it into our trailers and presenting it to other creatives and hearing that we're nailing it is like nothing else we've ever done. I don't think we'll ever do this again. I hope to God that we never do this again. But the fact that we are doing it in the first place has resulted in something really special. And as you've identified, an original, full-on hip-hop soundtrack concept album set in a not in the same universe, but in this anthology of grim stories and of shafts of light in between that. And hopefully players dig it.
Now, this is probably the most important question that I'm going to ask you this interview regarding anything on this project, but will that music be available on Spotify and also on TikTok for a special little shit post for me to make?
If I have any say in it whatsoever, absolutely yes.
Thank
Because
you.
there is days, this is one of the, I usually have a weird relationship with my work. I can't play the games that I make. I can't listen to or watch podcasts that I've appeared on, or shows even. I love producing things for people, with people, but the being a part of the creative process itself means that I fundamentally can't participate with the work anymore. The moment where I realized El Paso Elsewhere was special, specifically in the area of its music, is I would find myself humming a tune, or like, whispering a chorus to myself while I was grocery shopping. I go like, where's that from? It's like, oh shoot, that's my game. That's what we did. And I would be like looking for something on Spotify and be like, what is it? It goes like, it's like, oh shoot, that's one of our tracks.
I love
can't
that
listen
so
to it.
much for you. Oh my gosh, that fills me with such genuine joy, because like, it's no secret, we're TikTok mutuals. I see you on Twitter all the time. I love your projects. I love your studio. I love your shit posts. They're very, very, very funny. And I highly encourage anybody listening or watching right now to make sure that they follow this man on TikTok. He is doing the dang thing, and he's doing it properly. Now, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I think one of the biggest things that creators, especially of art, do, and I likewise also do, is we can't consume our own art for the exact reason you said. We're entirely too critical. We only see what we could have done better. And I'm very happy that you have such an organic relationship with this project, that you're able to actually enjoy it fundamentally. That truly speaks to how much a part of you this game is.
It's also, frankly, just an acknowledgement of how much I've enjoyed the process of widening our net of collaborators. Excuse me. Um, this soundtrack is not coming to being without my musical collaborator on this. And recently, he's been excited enough by the developments on the tracks to jump on the mic himself, and he's doing a fantastic job. Guy's name is RJ Lake. We've worked on him. We've worked with him since An Airport for Aliens, currently run by dogs, on everything we've made. Witch Strandings, An Airport for Aliens, currently run by dogs, Space World, Organ Trading Simulator, entirely different audio landscapes. He's worked with us on all of them. And the fact that there was a while where I felt scared, because so much of me was in this game and in general in strange Scaffold projects. And I'm starting to turn around on that to being deeply excited, because so much of these games are me, yes, but reflected through the prisms of all the people who touch the game as well. RJ Lake and his incredibly terrifying versatility and talent. When I celebrate that music track, it isn't me celebrating myself. It's me celebrating him at the same time. And I finally have broken through that mental gap. When I look at the art of the game made by Saint Vulture, and the animations by Zenuel, Romero Bonacausen, our Unity all-rounder, and again, terrifyingly versatile programmer, designer man, and the degree to which the levels and visuals of the game are a direct reflection of our collaboration. And I can get past myself to see just how much joy emerges from even an auteur-esque process, that sharing of responsibility and credit with the people around you. It's like nothing else I've done. I'd even call out there's a lot of people contributing to a lot of strange Scaffold games, so I don't want to miss anyone, but one I would call out for El Paso Elsewhere is Gary Kings. He's also made all of Strange Scaffold's trailers for some time now, and every trailer he produces for the game, in the process of working with him to create yet another showcase of what all of this project encapsulates, we come up with some new piece of visual language or vocabulary that makes its way back into even the overall lore of the project, from a narrative level. And again, getting out of myself enough to be able to celebrate my work and how much of that work is the direct results, input, and presence of my collaborators has been a really joyful thing to emerge from making El Paso Elsewhere in particular.
Salvir, I'm so incredibly happy that we had an opportunity to speak today regarding El Paso Elsewhere. And I want to thank you so much for your time today. Thank you again for talking not only about your creation, about all of your collaborators, but also about how we can truly create a sustainable environment for developers everywhere, regardless of what happens inside of our brains, as terrifying or as cannibalistic as they may be. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Everybody, as a reminder, you can currently wishlist El Paso Elsewhere on Steam right now. There will be a link inside of the bio, or you can actually check out the Steam page for Strange Scaffolding and check out some of their current games. Dog Airport game is my personal favorite, but I highly recommend checking out Space Warlord Organ Trader Simulator as well. That's been me, Sharpie, signing out. Until next time.